Now let's say, for example, to make it easy to animate, we want the foot to be related to the ground. Right now, if I move the whole leg, the foot follows. We're going to use something called constraint. I'm going to move this around. I'm going to get a null, and I'm going to get a box, a cube. I'm just going to move it out of the way. So, with our null selected, just going to move it over here. I'm going to go to edit and duplicate the null. Duplicate single, Control D. Just to get two nulls, like this. Okay. We have an option of constraining objects to other objects. What this means, if we select a null, and we go to constrain orientation to the cube, watch what happens. If I go to the cube and go to rotate, the null is being affected by the cube's orientation, even though they are not parented. In the schematic, we can see the null orientation is constrained by the cube. So wherever I rotate a cube, the null will do the same thing. Let's select the null. Now with the null selected, let's go to constrain position. Let's go to constrain position and select the cube. See how the null snaps to the position of the cube. Now, wherever I move the cube, the null will follow. When I rotate, the null will rotate as well. Now let's try the following. Click and select Constrain Compensate. Select the second null and go Constrain Position to the cube. See, it created a compensation between the cube's position and the null's position. I can turn it off. So when I move the cube, the other null will follow. When I rotate, only the null inside will follow. So let's do the following. Constrain orientation to the cube. So this way I can rotate a cube and the null will follow, and I can translate my null. Okay, so how do we find this useful? Let's see. Let's go back to our leg chain, and I'm going to create a null. And let's say we want to match exactly the position of our ankle right now, because the ankle is what controls our leg. So first thing, I'm going to select the null. I'm going to change the shape to a box. Do it a bit bigger. I'm going to create the color to red. So if I do a constrain position of the null to the box, the ankle will follow. But what I want to do is keep the position exactly as I place my bone chain. So I'm going to do the following. Transform match translation to the ankle. So now I can constrain position constrain to my null, which is going to be my controller. So now I don't have to animate the ankle anymore. I just come here and translate the controller. Another thing we want to do is, instead of having the hierarchy the foot being a child of the vector, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to take the foot chain, I'm going to cut it, and with constraint composition activated, I'm going to go to the root, constraint, position, to the vector. So watch what happens when I move my null. The foot bone is not rotating anymore. Why is this good? Let's see what happens if I take the leg. I can move it without rotating the foot. This way, the foot won't go underneath ground level. And if I want to make him walk, I just say him like here, take the controller, and make him walk. You can make more advanced rigs by making foot controllers and foot rolls. Right now we're going to stick to the basics. Now let's say we want to rotate the knee. If we come here and rotate, you see now our rotation is locked because we're using inverse kinematics. So how do we rotate the knee? We have to create what is called an up vector constraint. Let's get another null. This time I'm going to match transform the translation to the knee. I'm just going to move it back a little bit like this, and I'm going to select the leg bone, constrain. You can either do it here, from here, chain up vector, or from skeleton, chain up vector, and select the up vector. Now, when we translate the up vector, we get a rotation of the knee. I would recommend selecting the up vector and changing its display to something different so you don't get confused. Let's say pyramid. This way I can bend the knees this way and rotate. So this would be the basic you would need to start creating a rig. To understand how the bone chains work, how you can constrain, and how you can create up vectors. How do you remove constraints, and where do you find the constraints? First things first, let's select the ankle. If you see your schematic, like selecting 9, let's change this to ankle effector. If you select the ankle effector, you can see that it's constrained to it's constraining his position to the null, which could be the leg, control. So you can either select and delete it here, press enter to get this property page, or if you explore, let's go to the angle effector, E to select, or F to find, either way. When we go to kinematics, constraints, you can see the position constraint it has. So we can either, let me show you, single click on the icon, or double click on the name. I'm going to just lock the window for a second. So now, in the position constraint property page, we have active or deactivate. So if I move, nothing will follow. But if I activate, the leg will follow. Same thing, you have blending. Let's see. Blending will be useful if you have more than 2 constraints. You can have as many constraints as you want and then mix and match the blending weights you want. One thing I recommend is to set neutral poses for everything you have once it's set in the default pose you want it. Let's say, for example, this is the resting place of our bones. I'm going to go to transform, set neutral pose. This way, if I move my cube, even if I rotate, if I want to go back to its resting place, I can either zero this out or go to transform, reset all transforms. It will automatically snap to its default position. So I would do the same thing with the up vector. Set neutral pose. This way I can come here, move it around, and I don't have to worry about how do I reset it back to its default pose. I just come here and reset pose. Okay, so if you look at all the schematic, say, well, but everything is separated. Yes, it is. We have to have something that will bring everything together. First, I'm going to add what would be, let's say, for example, a pelvis. So I'm going to put it up in here, up on top, select none. I'm going to make it a box, and I'm going to make it wider like this. And last thing, I'm going to create a curve, a circle. Rotate 90 degrees. And this is going to be holding all the rig in place. So I'm going to parent this to my pelvis. I'm going to parent this way. Everything will follow. And parent to the circle. This circle is going to call rig. I still have my leg parented to the rig. I'm going to leg control. So what's going to happen? If I need to move my character around, I would just select the rig and move it wherever we want. Even rotate, and everything will follow. Even if I scale it, everything will be scaled proportionally. I can move it around, and I can animate. Let's make this neutral pose, neutral pose, and neutral pose. So now I can take this, move it around, like that. And if I want to reset its position, select the 3 objects, reset all transforms. Let's do another example. I'm going to open from the database the skeleton scene. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the mesh, press 6 for layer editor, layer manager, and create a layer from selection. I'm going to call this mesh. When I ever refer to the skeleton here, I'm going to be calling him a mesh, so you don't get confused with the skeletons we're going to create. So now I'm going to create a new layer called rig, and I'm going to set it as default layer, and the mesh I'm going to remove selectability. I'm going to work on the right view, focusing on the legs, and I want to show you something. I'm going to enable snap and left click to enable nulls and chains, and enable use 2D snapping in orthographic views. So for example, if I go to draw 2D chain, I press Ctrl, I want to be able to snap and create from exactly that same position. Snap, say here, snap, I can create from here. See? So, I'll delete this and do it all over again. So, with snapping option, I have it selected in Control. If you click on, it will always be snapping selected. So what I want to do is not click on and just use Control. So right now I'm going to create a 2D chain that will be covering more or less the femur area and the rest of the leg to where the ankle will rest. And middle click to end chain. I'm going to click Ctrl to snap. I'm just going to keep it simple right now. I can add 2 bone chain, like here and here, for the foot, and right click to end tool. If we see our view, now let's go to our front view, translate. I can even with Ctrl J position more or less what the ball joint would be, knee, ankle, Ctrl to snap. This would be better if we just translate and Ctrl to snap. Let's go to our top view, better yet our user view, and we can rotate to match a little bit more the foot. Pretty much. It's pretty much what we need. I'm going to do the same for the arms. I'm going to go to the front view, get rid of the grid with G, draw 2D chain from here to here and to the wrist. Middle click, Ctrl to snap, and the hand, right click. Let's see how it looks. So Ctrl J. You can snap to points, center of objects, anything you want. So I can snap to points, faces. Right now I'm going to just leave it like that, and I'm just going to position it a little bit to the right, like so. can be hard to read, so we can just choose shaded, and if we want we can also use X-ray mode. That way we can see the bones through, and just position the joints where joints should be, like so. Yeah, that's good. And this one, the hand, to follow the hand a little bit better. I'm gonna add one more, the clavicle. Starting from here, Control, center, right click, you click on front view, put it where it should be, Control J, and Control, and snap. Perfect.